Cool. Hi guys, welcome to Healthy Dog Eats with Dr. Kaz, and I'm Kim Pichotti. And this is our chef taster for those of you that are first joining us. We're going to talk a little bit today. Actually, we're going to do this, I think, in a course of maybe 2 shows. If we need 3, we'll do 3. We want to talk about kibble. We want to talk about the awful daunting experience that many of us have faced going into the stores, and there's a million bags of kibble, and how do we know what is the right thing and the right stuff for our dogs? I've done some back-end research and over the years and so forth, but kind of a little bit more forefront this past week because I wanted to see if anything has kind of changed over what I've learned, what's going on with the different rules with AAFCO. They are the governing agent of the dog food, and not much has changed, and that's kind of a little bit disheartening and discouraging. So we're going to take one of the ingredients today, which a lot of us think that is awesome for our dogs. Well, not think, we know it's awesome for our dogs. We're influenced by the fact that it's so good for us and a lot of the foods that we go to when we go to choose for our dogs, because it's a matter of love. I mean, it's our responsibility to feed them the proper foods. It's our responsibility to give them what's good for them, but yet are we kind of maybe being misled a little bit as to what we think is good for them and what is not good for them in different ways. And I kind of got this hit to me a few years back when my own dog Bernard had some issues, and I took him to the vet and they wanted to switch him to a white fish and sweet potato recipe. So I kept him on that for a while, and then as we were doing more with the puppies, we kind of found more with the research, and I wanted to switch his food up. So the one food company that we use, I had talked to the manufacturer, which was awesome, to be able to talk to this small time, I should say small time, but he's not Purina and he's not Nestle. So to be able to talk to him and find out what exactly was in his food, because I was like, I need to keep him on a fish formula and you guys don't have fish. And he said to me, Kim, well, you're a chef, right? Yeah, I said, I was. And he says, how long does fish last? And we all know not very long. So he said, think of the preservatives that would have to be placed into that fish in order for it to be safe for the dog. And the preservative is called ethoxyquin. And it's not even safe for humans. But yet that's what they use to preserve fish, salmon, whitefish, mackerel, whatever fish you find in your dog's or cat's food is usually preserved with that. So that's kind of was a little bit daunting to me. But we're going to kind of talk and work at the same time, because I could probably just sit here and talk this whole show and then our food will never get cooked. So what we're doing is we're actually making salmon patties with a side of some greens. So we're going to start off simply first, and we're going to make our dressings, a little bit of a puree that's going to go on top of our salmon patties. But the first thing we're going to start off with is actually sauteing up some of the ingredients that we're going to place inside of our salmon patties. And that is red pepper and celery and apples. And apples actually is a replacement for onions in our mind. Now you're thinking, okay, what the heck is she talking about now? And basically what they had done, I had saw an article in the Huffington Post. I thought it was kind of really a little bit crazy. They took people and they had them hold their noses and close their eyes, and they said, bite into an apple and bite into an onion and let us know if you can tell the difference. And they couldn't. That was like crazy to me. And I think a lot of it has to do with the texture, not so much the taste, because obviously we know onion doesn't taste like apple, but the texture. So that's why I decided, I was like, oh, we're smoking here. I decided, let's try and see and put some apples in. So we have one, like about a medium apple, all diced up there. We have 1/3 cup of red pepper. And we have 1/3 cup of celery. Let's get these last little pieces out here. And what we're going to do is we're going to let this saute up. We're going to get this going first because we want it to cool a little bit slightly before we put it into our salmon patties. And the reason that we do this a lot is we want to add the flavor separately, because we're not adding salt to our items. We're not adding, minced garlic to a lot of things. We may put a little garlic powder here and there, but we're not adding a lot of this stuff. No peppers, because we want to keep it where we're sharing it with them. You know, that's why we're doing a little bit of the toppers. If we want to add salt to our version or whatever after the fact, then that's fine. But we want to keep the dog's intake of that down. So in order to blend the flavors, it's best to do them up first and then add them to our patties. It's like pizza. If you want to make pizza, it's best to saute up your mushrooms and onions and all that kind of stuff, caramelize them, get them going really good, then throw them on your pizza, and then just basically heat them back up. So that's kind of the same concept that we do here. But we chose to also do fresh salmon and instead of the canned salmon, which, you know, it's fine to do this, the canned salmon, but it's one of those where it does have a lot of salt. So if you are decide to use it and do it, make sure you kind of rinse it off and wash it off. Fresh salmon, we've already cooked ours and we've kind of shredded it down, so we're going to use that for our patties. Cooking fresh salmon, remember, no more than 145 degrees, because basically what we're doing is we're putting the cooked items together. We're going to pop it back into the oven, get it seared, get a little bit of crispiness on our patties in order to do that. But first what we're going to do is we're actually going to make our topping, and this will kind of go on top of our patty. And what I've got is a roasted pepper. All I did was take one pepper and took out the seeds, threw that in the oven, a little bit of olive oil, spray olive oil kind of stuff like this on the pan, and then we topped it with it and roasted that off. And I had some artichoke hearts left from last week's recipe, so it was still in the refrigerator, so I'd like to kind of reuse things. So we're going to put that into our little food processor thing here. This. All right, and then we are going to just give that a little bit of blend, and then we're going to kind of pulse it up. And then we're going to add just a little touch of olive oil and then some grated Parm cheese. And that's it. Super simple. Because we're kind of counting on our Parm cheese to be a little bit of a salt factor in that. And like I said, this is kind of an optional thing. If you want to include this for the dog, fine. They don't really need it. Salmon patty is just fine for them. Put that in. Let that go. And then we're going to put into a little bit of our Parmesan cheese. I had about 1/3 of the cup in here, but it doesn't look like I'm going to need that much because it didn't give me much moisture, and I really don't want to add more oil. So we're going to put this in, let that kind of go through and all blend through. And then we'll just set this aside and let the flavors kind of marry themselves together, which means blending, and we'll get our dressing going as well. All right, so that takes care of that. Set this aside, and that'll be ready for later when we're ready to plate up our salmon patties. So back to salmon patties. Salmon is wonderful for your dog's immune system. It is wonderful. It helps with joints. It helps with arthritis. A lot of times people will put salmon oil and so forth in there, in the foods and everything. So you always want to make sure that you get the fresh caught Alaskan salmon. Is better than a farm-raised salmon. I think it kind of tastes better, and it's just a little bit, I don't know. I should say that's my preference. There's nothing really wrong with farm raised, but I just think it's a better course of tasting as far as the salmon goes. Next is going to be our balsamic dressing. And basically what we're going to do is when you make dressing, it's always 1/3 of your vinegar to 2/3 of your oil. So if you have a full cup, 1/3 vinegar, 2/3 oil. So we're going to pop in 1/3 cup. Let's see if I can see here. It looks like 1/3 cup of balsamic vinegar. And then we're also going to add 1/3 cup of Parmesan cheese in this. We are going to add a little bit of oregano and a little bit of basil. And once again, I just eyeball it up. Maybe it's like a teaspoon. We are going to add just a touch in here as well. And here. And here. All right. And we're going to get this stuff going. We're not going to put any garlic in our dressing because we really don't need it, because the Parmesan cheese actually really gives it a lot of flavor. So this is your immersion blender if you have one. Basically, we're just going to blend that up in there, kind of pulse that up, and get it going. Got that blended real well, and then we are going to take our olive oil. And you want to just kind of pour it in slowly. And look how simple that is. A little bit of Parmesan cheese, like a little bit of spices, and some balsamic vinegar. And this makes our dressing. There we go. See how it kind of turns? A little bit creamy. There we go. Easy enough. All right, guys. Well, we're going to we're going to rinse this off. We're going to go put this in the refrigerator for right now while we get that finished sauteing and cooled up a little bit, and then we'll come back and we are going to mix up our patties, talk about how the best way to cook those in the oven. We're going to learn a little bit more about some of the food. You're going to be surprised about what you're going to find out. So why don't you go watch in the Power Puppy Bite. Did you know the #1 cause of bad behavior in a puppy? Right, Mr. Hudson? You're our #1 cause of bad behavior. Not really. Boredom. That's really it in one word. Your puppy has to be stimulated, not only physically, but mentally. And actually, mental stimulation will get your puppy much more tired than any kind of physical activity you can do. Easy way to stimulate them mentally, put some kibble on the ground. Cover them with the hands. Work with them so they have to think. Let them figure out where stuff is. Take a bell, ring a bell. Let them figure out how to do it. Let them imitate what you do. We teach what we call like me, and it's wonderful for mental stimulation. And that's just another Power Puppy Bite. Welcome back, and now we are ready to make our salmon patties. But I want to tell you a little bit about our ingredients first, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about the salmon before we kind of get in there. So I want to tell you some more stuff about the kibble and the food and the companies that make it and all that kind of stuff. So nonetheless, he just like laid down like he's snoring. He's bored with me here. He needs to get better here. All right, anyway, what we do is we made our own breadcrumbs. I'm one of those that I kind of want everything as pure as I can and be more controlling of what goes in our dogs and what goes in our own bodies for that matter. So what I did was I took a little bit of oatmeal and actually just used this little pan and I sprinkled some oatmeal on, and then I took fresh basil and fresh oregano and put that on top of it, and I just put it in the oven for about, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes, depending how hot your oven runs, and let all the basil and so forth kind of shrivel down, dry down. Same thing with the oregano. The oats get just a little toasty factor on it. And then I just put it through my little food processor, and I have my own breadcrumbs. You know, if you wanted to then go ahead and season them with salt or garlic or whatever, but once again, we're not doing that because of the pups. So it works out real well. In fact, I got a little piece of the basil right there. So that works very, very good. So I want to talk a little bit more about salmon and about fish for your dogs. I told you earlier as far as, you know, the food company that we use, and how he said the reason that they don't do fish is because of the preservatives that they have to add into the fish. But do you know that there's actually a rule? It's called 95-25-3 that AFCO follows. And what that means is on your dog food, if it has the word dinner, recipe, or excuse me, I'm going to start from the beginning. If it has the word food, that means if it says salmon food, it has to have 95% of that product has to be salmon, which you're not really going to find that other than in possibly treats, because it would be an unbalanced diet if that was the case. So secondly would be our 25% rule, and anything that says dinner, recipe, or formula. You could say salmon recipe, salmon formula, whatever it may be. And this goes not just for fish. This is whether it be beef, chicken, turkey, whatever it is. It only has to have 25% of the product. Now, what's really scary is the 3% part. All it's got to do is say XYZ food with salmon, 3%. 3% of that whole giant 40-pound bag is only salmon. And what's even a little bit more bad is none of it has to be human grade. It's all animal grade. And animal grade means everything dumped in. So that's what kind of grosses me out. It's one of those where I want to cook fresh for us, I want to cook fresh for them, but that's where it's coming from. But when you go there and you look at the bags and you see it and you see pictures of this chicken on and salmon on it, you equate it to human food. You equate it to you equate it to this. You see a bag that says salmon, you're like, oh my gosh, that's wonderful for my dog. This is what my dog is getting. It's a mental image that is implied in our head. So that's what we think it is, but that's not what it is. And that's what is kind of not so good. They started with a process they called extrusion, and that's how they came up with dog food years ago. I think Purina and Nestle had started it. And what it was kibble. It was cereal, rather. And they used the same machines and the same process that they use today to make cereal for our kids is to make the dog food, and it's called extrusion. And what they do is they dump everything in a big pot, and they add in whatever antioxidants or preservatives or whatever it may be. They heat that up to between 100 Celsius and 200 Celsius, which is like boiling point at 212 to 392. And then they put it through the machine and they slice it off, and that's how they get the kibble. So, I mean, that's simply how it's put. So depending on what's in there and how much is in there, everything just really kind of gets mixed together. Very similar to how we're going to mix everything right now, because we're going to get our salmon patties going. And we'll talk a little bit more again. My oven is ready. And I want to show you what I'm doing, because this is how we're going to reheat or cook our salmon patties. Basically, I just have in there a baking sheet, and then I've got the baking sheet hot. So it's very similar then as if I had a pan that was hot and I was heating it up on the stove. It's going to create that instant sear for our patties. So we're just going to kind of get going here. We're going to dump in our salmon. We had about 11, 12 ounces of fresh salmon all together here. Once again, I'm going to make my little bit of well. I'm going to place in my apples and celery and the peppers. We're going to place in our ricotta cheese. And then what we're going to do is I always like to whisk up my eggs a little bit. I just kind of feel like it blends a little bit better. And it's all going to depend on how much moisture is left into our salmon. How much of the actual breadcrumbs that we're going to need. Sometimes you even, if you want to, you can add a little bit of olive oil. Just remember, there's not very much fat in this at all. I mean, you're talking very little into your chicken. You've got your fat content coming from your eggs, which is basically your binder. We're going to stir that together. We're going to actually add our parsley in as well. Might as well just put that all in. But we're going to get this going first. And then we may not even need that much breadcrumbs, because all we want to do is we want this to kind of hold together, go through, and actually it looks like we're probably going to get, because we want to keep the moisture in here. We don't want to get too much. I'm only going to put just the very little bit. That may have been 3 tablespoons, if that, just enough to give it a little bit of a binding factor. And that looks actually very good. So you can see the texture of it. So basically what we're going to do is patties are going to be formed just like that. Just like that, very, very simply. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and form all our patties up. I think I'm probably going to be able to get about 6 out of this recipe. We'll get them on the pan. Only going to be a few minutes each side. And then we'll have you guys come back and see it all plated up and tell you how to get the recipe. Welcome back, guys. Well, we have everything all plated up. We put a little greens on Cosmos's plate too. We're going to see if he'll end up eating them, but of course we didn't dress his, but we did give him a little topper of ricotta cheese, right? Because he has to have his cheese. I know that you do. But it did make 6 patties, so actually it turned out really, really great. And you can get the recipe at empoweredpups.com. And I hope you learned a little bit about dog food bags this week, or dog food companies, I should say. And we're going to talk a little bit more about it in the upcoming weeks, because there really is a lot to learn and a lot. I want to be able to give you that information, so when you go in there and in the stores, you can look at them and you can make an informed decision. You know, it happens that we want to do this, we buy with love. Food is love. You know, my husband used to always say to me, why do you go through all this effort to cook for the family, to do this, just whatever. But that was my way of showing them that I love them. And that's how we do it with the dogs. You know, we want them to have a piece of our plate because it just invokes happiness and invokes a great feeling in us. But it's a greater feeling if we know what we're really, really giving them. And that's what I'm here to hopefully teach you, or at least put some light onto it so we can give them the best that we can. So once again, get the recipe at empoweredpups.com, and we're gonna have up some lunch here and give Cosmos his, and thanks for being with us this week. We'll see you next week. Come on, Cosmos, look. Oh my goodness, what do we got? What is that?